$4.7 trillion. That's how much brands will spend on marketing this year, but only 15% of them is truly distinctive. There is a lot of money going down the drain. In this episode, we'll be taking a deeper dive into the study that Ipsos and Jones Knowles Ritchie did on distinctiveness, and we'll be talking with Lee Rolston, their Chief Growth Officer, on how brands can be more distinctive, what we can learn from the best brands, what codes work the best, and a lot more. So buckle up and let's talk branding. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Knowles Ritchie, even though I sometimes struggle to say, I just say JKR. That's easier. But can you tell us a bit about the company? You know, I think a lot of designers know it, obviously, but just in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
sure. So JKR, independent branding and design business. We are 33 years young, born out of London, but with studios in London, New York, and Shanghai. About 350 people, strong and growing. And yeah, I guess we're probably best known for our work with global kind of iconic brands. So brands like M&M's, Burger King, Coca-cola, AB InBev brands, Heinz, the list goes on. Yeah, and I guess our belief in, I guess as a business, and our purpose is, we believe we exist to inspire brands and people to be their true self. So as a result, it wouldn't be a surprise to hear that is kind of manifest in the work we do, trying to be as distinctive and true to the brand it's from as possible. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Yeah, love that, and maybe we can get into some of the work, but I think for me, one of the moments where I truly discovered your company, the company you work for, is the Burger King refresh, or I don't know how you call it, but it was like, for me, that was really getting to the essence of what this brand was, and refresh it in a beautiful way. But maybe we can get into that later. But actually, why we wanted to talk today was because of this lovely study you put out. It's called Be Distinctive Everywhere, and it was done with Ipsos, I think. Could you just give us a bit of like a backdrop of like why did this thing came to life, and how did that
Sure,
happen?
yeah. So I guess it's kind of been in the planning for a long time. So I guess to take a step back, philosophically, kind of our business was formed on this brilliant Oscar Wilde quote: "Be yourself, everyone else is taken," and that's kind of the philosophy that runs through everything that we do. And as a result of that, we're constantly on the look for proof and evidential kind of data that supports that belief that when brands show up as the best version of themselves, that's where growth and that's where opportunity comes. And so I think it was just before lockdown 2020, and this amazing study, The Power of You, kind of came across our desk, which was done by Ipsos, which was 2,000 of the most effective pieces of I guess video content, branded video content in the US market. And it made the case and proved the power of some of the most effective work is even more effective when it's got the presence of distinctive brand assets in it, and it rated the impact of each one of the different types of assets. So that really kind of sparked our interest. So we connected with Ipsos and said we'd love to do something at a broader level beyond just video comms and just look at assets in the round. So that was the conversation, and what we did was they opened up the database of all their distinctive brand asset tests to try and see the patterns, see the themes, and understand kind of the magnitude of the task for branding businesses to make brands distinctive. So we looked at all that data. So over 500 brands, 5,000 assets, 26,000 consumers, I think it's 33 categories in 26 countries. So a big study. And then we looked at the kind of the impact on logos, on slogans, on colours, on mascots, and on products. And so that was really the data set. They gave us the analysis and the data, and we did the commentary and the context. And that is the report. So hopefully people have got a chance to read it, and hopefully it's engaged and informed them. I guess Was it a shock? I'm not sure. Well, I guess what the headline data said was, you know, unfortunately, 15% of all the assets that have been tested are truly distinctive. So I guess it highlights how difficult that is, and then we break it down into each one of the subsets. And so it's all about, understanding what does it take to be, a truly distinctive brand. And the way that the Ipsos classified it was gold, truly distinctive. Implicitly and intuitively, people know who the brand is, and they don't make mistakes. They get it uniquely attributed to the right brand. And so we knew it made us realize how difficult being truly distinctive is. We want to understand how we can help, people, to continually try and make their brands more and more distinctive. So that's kind of the report that we're talking about today. Yeah, I guess kind of in a lot of the distinctive brand asset studies tend to follow a common pattern around kind of a matrix or a grid of the percentage of the audience who perceive that asset to be uniquely attributed to that brand, so they don't mistake it for anyone else, whether it's a Budweiser logo or it's a Heinz slogan. You know it's them, but it's also the implicit brand association. The speed at which you don't think about it. You go, okay, right, it's definitely them. I get it in a heartbeat. And so it's those two factors which kind of set you on the path of, if the majority of people uniquely know it's you and they get it intuitively, that's how you get to the gold standard. And then again to bronze, where people are struggling. The majority of people are going, I'm not sure who that is, and I need to think about it as well. That's when you're in the territory of the generics. So we're all striving for that top right hand corner of the box, which is the gold standard.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think like the other big number here, and I'm just gonna quickly scroll through the study. Like this is also a very big number. 4.7 trillion will be invested in marketing every year. Like, what is the issue linked to distinctiveness with this big number then?
Yeah, so again, that's the kind of Forrester forecast of kind of when you aggregate up all of the spend in different disciplines of marketing. And I guess if we all kind of take a step back, whatever discipline you are in marketing, you are building a brand. You are building the recognition, the understanding, the consideration, the love, and the purchase of a brand. And so the first thing you've got to understand is who you're in the presence of. And if we're failing on that, that's the fear, is that we may be doing a lot of stuff, making ourselves very busy, but if people don't take out, I'm in the presence of X brand or Y brand, then we've got a problem. And so, salience and front of mind, is proven to be, one of the most critical things for being considered for purchase. And I guess in our fragmented world, where there are so many channels, there are so many ways that a brand can be trigger awareness, and you can almost buy it instantaneously, or you need to have latent memory to go and buy it later, or it's a D2C brand and you need to be in the consideration. All those different factors, you've got to be able to know who it is, and that's where in this fragmented world it's even more important to be distinctive and make sure that we are all making sure that the top of the funnel, the awareness bit of any brand, is as healthy and as strong as it can be. That's really what kind of I hope we're all trying to achieve in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like, I know for a fact that a lot of designers don't often communicate very well with like marketeers, and vice versa. Like, sometimes they seem like different worlds, but I think it's very important what you say about like how very interconnected the creation of the assets, the management of the assets, the marketing, the campaigns, all of it really is. I think it's something we can't stress enough, basically.
No, and I think the brand is the glue that holds all that together. However it's orchestrated, it needs to, it all needs to feel true to the idea behind the brand. It needs to stand out and stand apart from its competition. It needs to get you pulled into to make that purchase as well.
Exactly. Like, I think it was on Burger King where you guys mentioned something like the brand needs to be craveable as the product is, but I really like that term. Let's maybe before we dive in, because there's slogans, there's mascots, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, but just one more question. Like, it's clear that companies are struggling to be distinctive, like to crack the code on being distinctive. A lot of these brands we see in the report are obviously very well known and iconic brands, but like, let's say as a growing brand, a smaller brand, like how can we start thinking about this stuff? Like what's the secret formula here?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when we use examples and things spring to mind, it's obvious that we're going to go to the classics and the brands that have either been well protected or well managed and orchestrated over time, or
Yeah.
and built distinctive elements into them. But it's just as easy, it's just as important that emerging brands take that view as well, because it's quite hard. I think. A lot of forces are working against, kind of being distinctive, whether it's, the shorter tenure of senior leaders in marketing and people coming in with new ideas and fresh takes, or whether it's the endless need to have, new news and fresh presentation. Sometimes that can be at the expense of being deferent to the brand and the assets, or whether it is that, running a brand now takes a lot of people because of the touch points, because of the points of sale. Sometimes, people can be, channel specific and not looking at the bigger picture. And so some channels, the rules may suggest that, you need to play by those rules at the expense of the brand. And it's all about balance and making sure that, that yes, we are focused on the metrics and the performance and the delivery and the conversion, but equally that we know that this is the brand we're in. People like Nike are brilliant at it. They can. You feel throughout the entire kind of awareness to sales funnel, you feel like you're in their presence because they're so well orchestrating all of the elements of the experience and the identity. So, it can be done, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. It takes time, I guess. That
Yeah.
also. Let's look at some of the like the different categories because there are some really interesting things. I think so. These are just the stats we talked about earlier. So I'm not gonna go too deep into that. But let's look at logos, for example. Like, what were the main findings when it came to logos? Like, because it's the typical thing, like we say often say is a brand is your logo, and it's like the one identifier everybody kind of has. But like, what did you see in the data?
Yeah, well, what was interesting was just, even again, you'd imagine that the logo has to be you and unmistakably you, and it wasn't that always the case. So, I think, of course, the logo should be both the recognizable kind of symbol of the brand, but also symbolic of the idea that drives the brand. It should have that kind of meaning built in it. And so, yeah, I guess, we expanded it beyond just things like, brands, but looking at fashion and looking at bands and music and stuff. That some of the best logos are band logos because they don't just tell you the name of the band. They bring it to life in quite a visceral way. Heavy metal logos feel like heavy metal. A Run DMC logo feels pretty big, bold, and from the street. So it's really interesting that, and we talk a lot about where logos come from. The idea that that making marks is as old as humanity, and so it's just really important that people appreciate that it's not just the name of the brand or the icon, but it is actually in many ways the essence and the soul of it.
Yeah, and I think a really interesting point made also in the study is around shapes versus words. Like, maybe if you could quickly elaborate on that, because I do think it's a confusion we sometimes have.
Yeah. I guess kind of we all think that we read with our kind of read with our minds, but we really read with our eyes. That sounds obvious, but like the shape and the dimension and what it is often easier to draw than the actual letters themselves. Amazon's a great example, and those little moments where someone's thought a bit about the idea behind it. So obviously Amazon delivers things from A to Z, and putting a little smile in there is just genius. And hats off to to the agency that did that. You know, it's a, and those moments, you make the point in the study, they make you give a second glance, and that second glance is really important, because in a world where a lot of, especially digital brands, are focused on the digital suitability of the typeface they use, which is great.
Yeah.
Sometimes at the expense of kind of standing out from the crowd. So I think it's great when, you know, you get that moment where there's a personality, and there's legibility, and there's comprehension as well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think sometimes like we go as far as like making logos into a typeface choice, and really like stripping all character and shape from it, where it becomes really hard to actually become this identifier for you. So I think it's like we've seen it in a lot of brands, like fashion brands as well, where the evolution was called even blending, and
Yeah.
now I think there's again like some rebalancing happening, where we see companies returning to their old logos. I don't know if you see any like evolutions when it comes to this part of the design, the brand design.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that people talk about kind of going back to the past, or flattening of logos, and I just think that, you know, we're in an era now where a logo has to do. It doesn't have to just show up; it has to do things. You know, people adapt them, use them to signify moments in culture. They use them for kind of collaborative experiences. They place them out of context, and I think it's about relevance. It's having something that you can use, and you can remain kind of, you know, protective and respectful of, but also be fresh and new in the same breath as being consistent. And so playing around with logos has become a very kind of, you know, common trait, and placing it out of context, a pair of, you know, Supreme on a pair of boxing gloves, or, you know, the actual miniature bites of Snickers, kind of saying Snickers, but it doesn't. You know, that kind of stuff is when you've got an iconic brand, you can really have a bit of fun with it, and that's really, you know, and as a consequence, you probably want to get away from the superfluous stuff like shadows and, you know, flares and touches and all that stuff that other people can do, and try and be, you know, the most distinctively authentic self when it comes to logos, and have a bit of a play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's super interesting. Let's move forward a bit uh, towards slogans, because of
Yeah.
course like slogans, really interesting area. I think it's one of those things where it's also what we saw in the data was that it wasn't the most like sticky asset, but still it's a
Mm.
very interesting one. Like where do you think this friction comes from, that maybe in general it's harder to stick in our brain because it's not visual, but yet it's also a very interesting asset.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, the best ones are, you can't help but, you know, show me a bucket of KFC and I'll think of that line. You know, Apple, I think different, but they've not used that phrase for many years. I think the rarity comes in the transience of campaigns. You know, I think the best, you know, brands hit upon a great kind of shorthand for what their brand stands for in a slogan, and they live it, and they build
Mm.
it, and they build it, and they build it, and they build it, and they build it, and they abstract it, or they bring it to life, or they give it a metaphor, but they're building into, you know, that phrase, whether it's think different, you know, you're not you when you're hungry, or just do it, and so it takes on a life of its own. But sometimes what happens is, again, with the transient nature of campaigns, or different agencies, or different leaders on brands, there's a feel to need to move away from the past. And we use the American Express example of a great one where they stay true to the essence of what their phrase is and what their slogan is, but keep reimagining it in today's context. So I think, you know, making sure that, you know, the slogan that you build into is true to you. It's sticky. It's memorable. It has the truth of what you are in it, and then keep working it and keep applying it and keep pursuing it, because it definitely is. You know, it's definitely worth the hard yards when you do get a really distinctive slogan.
Mm, yeah, and I guess like even beyond like what you said about having a, for example, a more dynamic headline that basically has some similar formalities but can change, which is an interesting adaptation. The point that's also made in the study, which I think is very important, is that almost the style of speaking or writing is as important as that singular message, and that can also become somewhat of a distinctive asset. The example of Oatly, like, I don't know how you see that from your standpoint as a branding agency. How much do
Yeah,
you also work on that, for example?
huge. It's huge. I mean, I'm unfortunately old enough to remember kind of when you could possibly buy your way into the consciousness with a slogan through media spend and be singular with
Mm.
it. It's much harder to do that now. So again, in that context, it's important that all the words, all the voice, the way you show up, the sonics that you use, are all helping each other build a tone and a thought, and especially in CPG brands, because you're gonna or the actual package of something. You've got a canvas where you can converse and talk, and the more you can build your brand in the way you talk, like Apple's, I just love the design in California, made in China. It's just a beautiful phrase. Didn't need to put it on there, but it says everything about the kind of West Coast spirit with the certainty of performance from production in China. It's brilliant. And Oatly has got a really irreverent tone which disarms the audience to try something different and make a positive change. So I think tone of voice is incredibly important, and one that I think is vastly important. It's super important to orchestrate, and again, not only that, but the way that your words show up should feel like they have come from you.
Yeah.
So typefaces, I know people sometimes feel like they are the kind of the indulgence of the graphic designer, but the way that we see it is, the more that you can be inspired by truths within your brand or graphical associations with the parent, then the more the more the whole system hangs together. So you said you mentioned Burger King earlier. The thought of that brand wanting to be as craveable as the food. The typeface feels like it's kind of gooey. But you could eat it, and that's deliberate. In the same way that we talk about Stella Artois, and it has that kind of refined elegance that comes from the history and the brand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Belgian, and was interesting for me to see that, like, Stella Artois, which is like from when I
Yeah,
grew up, to like the way, even visually, I don't have it here, but the way, like, the logo now flipped on the can and stuff. Like, I think those are really great examples of making something iconic even more iconic and more
mm.
recognizable, and like strip it to its bare essentials, which I think is very interesting. So.
Yeah.
Let me just. Yeah, and do we have to talk about AI? I mean, how is the podcast today not talking about AI? So maybe briefly, let's just address it. Like, what is, how will this influence? Maybe, well, of course, there's the verbal part, which you definitely have some options for. But, like, in general, what's your take on AI and branding?
Well, I think the positive of AI for branding is that it can set guardrails. Again, if the prompts are right and they're governed by what the brand wants to come across as, how it should show up, what experiences you can provide, then it helps to narrow the moments where things happen that are off brand. So I think in that respect, it's to be embraced. I think it's to be supported, because it can help the brand show up more consistently, more distinctively, more true to the vision of what the people who run the brands and the audiences that experience them want it to be. So I think in that application, I think as always, the question when it comes to a brand is about IP and what constitutes playing around with the brand in service with the IP, and what becomes somebody else doing something you wouldn't want to do with it. So I guess, like every industry at the moment, I think the opportunity is being explored and embraced, and then kind of the controls and the checks and the disciplines probably need to be applied as well. But we just it's another tool in the branding armory, as far as we're concerned, that you utilize to drive the brand to be as distinctive as possible.
Yeah, I like that. I like that perspective. I mean, it's like the most cliche answer would probably be like it's all done where creativity is done, but like actually, how some examples also gave in here, like how you could make a brand voice into something like an AI that could do the same at different touch points of the brand is actually a really interesting way to make it even more consistent across the
Yeah.
board. So I think there's some really good opportunities hinted at here, and it's just interesting to explore and see where it goes. So I think that's a great perspective. Let's move forward to my favorite piece of all. I don't know if you know, but I'm obsessed with brand mascots. I'm actually making a whole film about it. So this was like I was waiting for it to be in the study, and of course it's there. Like,
Yeah.
what is up with mascots in the first place? A lot of times when I talk to people, it's like, oh, mascots, that's a thing of the past. Like, is it? Is it the case that they are declining? Like, what's happening from your perspective?
Yeah, I suppose the kind of the perceived sort of perception of them is that they belong somewhere in the past, because the golden era was kind of obviously when broadcast and kind of, a lot of the CPG brands took on mascots as a kind of characterization of it, of their brand, and in an era, where I suppose we feel we're more sophisticated in our marketing. The great thing is that they're so powerful, and actually you ignore them or you dismiss them at your peril. And the reason we see that is it literally can be the characterization of your brand, and in some instances, it's as powerful as the brand. Certain examples we pull there that you couldn't imagine certain brands without their mascots, and they're having a reconnaissance. I'm sorry, renaissance rather than reconnaissance.
Yeah.
They're having a renaissance because the fashion people and the streetwear people are really leaning into them. If you think of some of the most kind of powerful, cool brands, they've got these little funny things attached to them, whether it's the bathing ape or the Louis Vuitton little character, or or the 100 or whatever. They've got these funky things that really sort of like get into culture. So we think that there's real power in them. I think you've got to use them responsibly, of course, and make sure that they're not targeted in certain areas of the younger generations. But they are a great asset, and we salute them in this here, and I can't wait to see your film.
Thanks. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. But obviously, I think a lot of what you said in here is also something I'm exploring further, and I think there are actually a lot more brands either like revamping some of their mascots. So it's interesting to see. I think it's one of those ways to bring back some emotion. Like the M&Ms is actually also an interesting one in the sense that they've been like going through some hoops lately, but I guess now they're back stronger than ever.
Yeah, and I think
That's
that group of characters are there to bring us all together, and so they constantly will evolve and reflect the society we are in, so that we're all feeling part of it. So I think that they're probably one of the most distinctive characters out there. By that merry bunch of characters in themselves are hugely distinctive, and it's almost impossible to distinguish them from the brand itself, and they're great.
Yeah, and like even what's interesting about these ones, I think, is like there's another chapter on product, but actually like they are mascots and they are products. Like
Yeah.
they're basically the product running around with legs, which is like win-win because you're showing your mascot, you're showing your product, you're showing your brand. Is very like so singular and powerful. And I think like that's the best way to go.
Mm.
Let me see here if I got any questions about mascots. Like no, just one more. Like, do you have a favorite mascot yourself? Always curious about that.
Well, actually, if you notice in the report, there's a cuddly toy mascot of Lacoste, which actually
Yeah.
I admit is mine. So it's yeah.
Oh
So
wow.
I just think the Lacoste logo, and as it says it just you know, it makes no sense. But
Hmm.
it makes a standard polo shirt worth a lot more on your on your back than a normal one. So yeah, I think marking that one because it's a bit weird, but a bit great.
Yeah, I love it. I love that example as well. And like what I think is very interesting is that actually like we're starting to see some B2B brands also embrace mascots,
Yeah.
which is a great opportunity because I mean, in a boring space, it's even better to put this character, and that's also one of the points made in this study is like you can do with a mascot what you want. It's hard to
Mm.
do that with actual people who go off and I don't know slap somebody on the Oscar nomination, like a lot harder to control, I guess.
I agree, and it's interesting you bring that page up because I think a lot of app-based businesses are embracing them because of, you know, who doesn't want to see a kind of fluorescent green owl staring back at you on your phone? It's just you know it's distinctiveness on in your hand as well as you know elsewhere in the world. So no, I think that you know, they're a really powerful part
Mm.
of the arsenal of assets.
Yeah, and Duolingo is actually interesting because he's on like the character is on TikTok and is doing
Yeah.
amazing, like really growing fast, and it's such an interesting way. Like if Duolingo as a brand itself would show up on TikTok, would be a lot
Mm.
harder. But because this is like a dancing cute character, it works for the medium. So that's also interesting.
Yeah, and it's
Uh,
also great for learning, isn't it? You know, you've got a cute symbol, a cute mascot who helps you learn. So no, it's great. It's great.
Love it. Yeah, mascots. Cheering that they're in there. Let's talk a bit about color.
Yeah,
It got like I think the lowest score, right?
yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. And I
Yeah.
think this is the point we make with this is it is almost impossible to completely universally own a color. It's
Mm.
very rare. But it's all in context. You know, probably the Tiffany teal is possibly the one that transcends its category. I think most people would go, oh, that's Tiffany. But its power is, you know, when even when it's a generic, when you place it in context of the category you're in, you add shape into it, you mix two or three colours together and add an icon in there, and then it's almost like it's almost unmistakably you, even though in this example these are, you know, arguably identical in many ways, but they're
Mm.
not. So it's kind of it's always in context of the moment, of the category, of the way you apply it. That's when I think color comes into its own. Um,
Yeah.
but and also it's kind of we make the point that there's a lot more knowledge about color theory now. There's a lot more science behind what color actually means and imbues, and that's great because we can learn from that and we can choose to apply it when it's right. But equally, the pitfalls of that is, you know, that knowledge is not proprietary. It's not exclusive. So everyone knows that. So if you know that blue means, you know, certainty and security in financial services, so does everyone else. So you've got to think about, you know, do you play by the rules or play against it? And equally, you know, heritage and geographical provenance play a part. You know, this they make the point about, you know, these brands are both owned by the same company, but in certain
Mm.
geographies, they will mean, you know, different. You know, they'll take the high ground of what chocolate is, and yet, you know, they're strikingly close to each other.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also interesting to see like you mentioned the example of like Monzo in the study which took like a different color than most banks do and
Mm.
it's a lot more vibrant. I think it's indeed a challenge like in some categories, especially in like food packaging where you have like colors that sometimes indicate certain things like this is salt, it's like
Mm.
red, this is paprika, this is blue. I mean that's here. I don't know if it's anywhere
Yeah,
like that, but
yeah.
like I think it's interesting to like think about how to balance
Mm.
being like indicating that you're part of a category, but also making your own choices. I don't know if you have a thought on it, but
Yeah, I suppose there's certain codes of that have been, you know, been passed down for centuries that are possibly even unbreakable. You know, if you don't want someone to go down a one-way street, you're not going to put a blue circle up with a white line in the middle. You're going to rely on the fact that everyone knows a red circle with a white line is don't go down there. So there's certain things you just got to go accept are truths. But then at the brand level, that's when you can probably, there may be category norms you can play with, but with the central brand idea, there's nothing stopping you having a hot coral card in your wallet. And that's when sometimes the breakthroughs and the exciting stuff happens. And then equally, playing off the codes of other areas is great. And we made the point with new media brands now that they're playing to different rules now, and they can play around with it because if they operate in a digital sphere, they've got a much broader palette of stuff to play with. It can move, it can change over time. So it's a really exciting time, I think, for kind of the use and the application of colour when it comes to brands.
Yeah, love that. I mean, there's a lot more to tap into about color, but maybe just before we start looking at the final lessons, I think the category on product was, of course, very interesting to see. Like the one point that you brought forward in the study a lot was on the importance of like brand experience. And I think that's a really interesting one. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, because oftentimes like when brand designers or brand agencies come in, like, I mean, product is sometimes already defined in a way. Like, do you have any ideas on how to make sure that this whole thing comes to life together and that the brand experience is one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and then what we tried to do in the study was expand what product is. Because, of course, the product is the physical, whether it's the physical car or the physical chocolate bar or the physical computer. But really, the thing that could be distinctive may not be the physicality of it. It might be something around it. So, we talk about beer in the study because it's hard to make, exception of Guinness maybe, it's hard to make a liquid distinctive because they're very similar. And when you transfer Stella Artois from a glass to a chalice, the whole impression of what you believe that to be, how you feel about the brand, how you revere it, even the word says something different about the brand. So in those moments you can really lean into the thing you can control and own. Similarly, the example of Pret, when Pret depict food, it's in a playful way that is always sort of in service of this little kind of game of is it food or is it a rabbit or a monkey or whatever, and that's great because that's their playful nature coming through. But that's that just takes the product to a different place. So it's about finding the and then an experience. Experience design doesn't need to be so seamless you can't remember it. Experience design should have a little bit of brand grit in it, so that you go, oh, that's really nice. That's obviously them. And he keeps you coming back. So it's just looking for the moments of, it's very rare you get a super duper, there's only one of them and nobody can copy it. But there's always moments to be distinctive in the product and the experience,
Yeah, and I think what's such an interesting point made also is like we talked about branding and marketing, and obviously this whole thing about distinctive assets is key to build broader awareness and make people know about the brand. But actually, this part about brand experience is really also about taking it to the lowest part of your funnel and beyond, like making it even in the details like a part of this feeling, and don't like stop at okay, you bought us and now thank you and bye bye. And I think that's really like the best brands go beyond there, and then they stay memorable and like
and I think our view is that distinctive brand assets aren't exclusively visual or kind of the kit. It's the whole experience. A feel, a scent, a sound, a swipe of a transition of a website is just as powerful, and it's the orchestration of all those things. Because ultimately, again, on the Apple, it's hard not to eulogize about how good Apple are, but all the branding elements would be meaningless if that experience wasn't backed up by the way that all their products work, and that's really the ethos. There's one thing around organizing and orchestrating the way the brand shows up, but it comes from a central thought that, in the best instances, are running the business, not just the brand.
Yeah, love that. Let me see here. So I think we went through it, and we have some really interesting points here. I have one more question, but maybe before we diverge from the study,
Yeah.
like, uh, any closing thoughts on like takeaways for people to remember?
I mean, I think the report kind of says it, which is the best brands we think have got a central thought that everything depicts, symbolizes, evokes, brings to life in the consumer's mind, and the best ones of those are certainly from people who are responsible for bringing these brands to life. They need to be able to do something with that thought. It needs to allow the brand to act and behave and do. So the more active these thoughts are, the more they can inspire you not to just communicate what you think about the world and show up like people expect you to, but actually make you do things that are in service to what the consumer wants and what the brand's about. That's the most important bit. The next piece is very much, understanding what makes you distinctive, understanding the tools at your disposal, but orchestrating them in service of the experience. To your point, it's not about a repetitive, singular application of the logo everywhere. It's about, does it all feel like it's one complete experience? And then the third bit, to the point about AI and other platforms now, it's never been harder to get your brand out into the world because there's so many different touch points, but it's never been easier to manage those touch points because the technology is there now. And all we're saying here is, yes, it should be effective. Yes, it should be driving conversion. Yes, it should deliver on all of the KPIs, but it should feel and look like you as well. So, set those controls to distinctiveness as well as kind of effectiveness, and use the tools at our disposal to get the brands out there in the best possible way. That's the three bigger points we make in the report.
Yeah, love those. And maybe just a side question. Let me just share this, by the way, so the people watching on YouTube can see. Like, what the earlier on I talked about the Burger King rebrand. I don't know if you
Mm.
call it a rebrand actually, but yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, and I think like what I've seen with a lot of the work that you do at JKR is like you manage to find this balance between it being super fresh, like it feels like, I think a lot of people put this in their mood boards as something they want to achieve, yet it feels also very like respectful of the
Mm.
heritage and like the history of the brand. Like, how do you find the balance between those two? I think you found a way to do that really well.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the founding quote, be yourself, everyone else is taken. We are fastidious about and really geek out on what is it about this brand that makes it so special? When was it at its best? What is the characteristics of this brand at its best? What is it that's competitive against its direct competition? And sometimes you need to look beyond where the brand is today, and sometimes it sits in the past,
Mm.
as Birkin. But equally, it's about an interpretation that's behind. This is all driven by a really big thought about making a brand as craveable as the product. So once you've got that,
Mm.
then are respectful enough and humble enough to realize that you don't have to reinvent the brand. You need to get the brand at its best moment. Then that's kind of, I guess, at the heart of our thinking. And then make sure you've got wildly talented creative people who can deliver, like we're fortunate to have on our side of the fence. So yeah, it's that's kind of the spirit of why our stuff looks the way it does.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's such an inspiring example. Um, that's it, Lee. It was lovely having you on. Super interesting to dive with you in this stuff. Like, if people want to find you or get in touch or maybe see more work, like, where can they go?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read the report, bedistinctive.com. JKR Global is where you'll find us. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Yeah, if anyone wants to chat, I'm always up for it. But it's been really, really enjoyable doing this. I've got to say.